Right after my son was born, my husband and I were still debating what to name him. It was really high stakes, and not just for the obvious reasons. They also hold you hostage at the hospital until you fill out the birth certificate. But when we were during that process, I was thinking about when I immigrated to America when I was a 4-year-old, and I lived through the debate to name me, something most babies don't really have to think about. And I thought about how when I was little, I was really obsessed with the name Jenny. It was because when we had moved from Vietnam to California, we moved in with distant relatives, and they had a boy named Jimmy. And Jimmy's dad told me on my first day in America that I needed an American name like Jenny. And so I was like, okay. And from then on, I was just so sure and so sold that I would be an American girl named Jenny. But you know, I had to think about this so I was thinking about that when we were deciding what to name our son, and I also had to think about the fact that I really hated my Asian name, that I was really embarrassed that I had an Asian name because of what it meant for my identity. It meant I wasn't from here, especially in LA's Chinatown. And so I remember being a kid on the playground and just saying, telling people my name was Jenny, and then I moved on to other aliases like Grace and Rachel and Terry and Sam. And it was like remembering that. It was almost like I had always anticipated this moment when I would have the full power to give my kid a name that I actually liked. Like Jenny or Jimmy or Donnie or something like that. But back at the hospital postpartum, I had to face off against my husband. He was adopted from an orphanage in South Korea when he was 9 years old, and he grew up with lovely white parents in rural Wisconsin. And he was renamed Edward John Obermiller, which is super German and has a lot of vowels and it's quite long. But I thought it was really regal, and I said, you know, maybe that. But Eddie wasn't interested in that kind of a junior. He wanted to name our son Youngbae. It's a Korean name spelled Yongbae. And I was, of course, kind of surprised, and I didn't know what to do, and I just thought about, you know, how that was a reflection of his experience growing up Asian American, that he knows the many times he showed up somewhere and confused or surprised or even disappointed people just by being an Asian guy with a white name. And so here we were debating if it was actually better or worse to give our son an Asian first name, given that he would have a white last name. And I just couldn't shake how hard it was for me as a kid. Like, you know, it's like the little things, right? You don't get the toy, you don't get the name, or something like that. And I just thought, you know, I don't want my son to feel as tortured as I did every time there'd be a substitute teacher, because he would know his name's gonna get butchered, right? Like it was always a source of anxiety for me as a kid. And I hate it, you know, now looking back, and I cover education, so I think about kids a lot. And I think, you know, I don't want that for my son. I don't want him to have anxiety and, you know, just to feel so conflicted about something as superficial as a name. And so I told my husband, I want to give him an inoffensive name, something nobody can make fun of. And Youngbae, knowing that not only is it kind of slang for Lobo these days, it was also like, I just didn't want him to have a name that that I knew a lot of people would think is a funny name at some point in his life. So I told my husband, I insist on an inoffensive name. I want a boring name. And he insisted, you know, there was really no such thing. And I looked to my husband, and I obviously married him because he's the best man I know. And, it hit me that as parents, we'd always be looking backward and forward at the same time as first-generation Asian American parents. It was just inevitable. We'd always be looking at what happened to us and what we're doing to this kid. And so, I kept thinking about that and wondering what the best thing to do was. And I really wanted to leave the hospital. So, and so I just kept debating it, and it was such a crisis to me for a brief moment in time, and in addition to, postpartum. And I just kept thinking about, like, what's better, what's worse, as most parents do. And, I had to remind myself, like, my husband and I, we are incredibly blessed. We have had great lives. We have great lives. We both, me as an immigrant refugee, he as an orphan overseas, like, we somehow both get to grow up in America. We both got to go to college. We both got to get good jobs. And frankly, we both got to marry super hot people. And as a result, we have this beautiful little boy who's like the joy of our lives. And so, I just looked at my husband and I thought, you're the best person I know. And, I was so attracted to him because he has this sort of level-headed, low-key confidence and resilience about him that I know comes from the power of truly embracing who you are. And I, like any mother who made a child in love, I just want my son to be the kind of man that his father is. And so we did name him Young Bae. It means inspired dragon in Korean. And it's also my husband's birth name before he was adopted. And I love it so much. Thank you.